Hey, Michael with X-Force PC. I'm going to mostly stay out of the shot here because what I'm about to show you, I need to show you my computer screen, and if I'm in the shot, it makes things be out of focus for what's back here. So largely, I'm going to try to stay out of the shot. So what we want to take a look at today is why the frame rate in X-Plane drops so precipitously when we add additional screens. And one thing we're going to take a look at is something called it's in the developer menu called the Micro Profiler. And I was kind of complaining about this in front of Austin the other day, and he said, well, why don't you take a look at it in this Micro Profiler? So he showed it to me, and that's what I'm going to show to you. I'm going to give you my take on how this thing works. I'm no expert. But right now we're getting about 88 to 90 frames per second, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on two additional screens. First of all, I'm going to turn on one, and we just dropped to 45 frames per second, so that cut our frame rate almost in half. And then I'm going to jump over here and I'm going to turn on another screen. So now we have three screens going, and now we're down to 30. So we went from basically 90 to 45 to 30. So we're at 1/3 the frame rate we were getting, and that's because we're doing 3 times the amount of work. But one thing you'll notice if you look in Task Manager is our processor utilization really hasn't gone up that much. And that's because the majority of this additional work that's having to be done cannot be done concurrently. It has to be done on the same thread, and it has to be done one after the other. And that's what we're going to take a look at here in the Micro Profiler. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these two additional screens off real quick. And I'm going to go up here and I'm going to look at in developer menu. I'm going to show the Micro Profiler, and this thing looks crazy when it's running full speed, not paused. First thing you generally want to do is pause this thing so you can actually see what's going on. And I'm going to get in the frame a little bit here, but every time you see the word frame boundary, that's a new frame. Okay, so they're currently on the screen, we've got about 4 frames showing. And what I can do is if I just want to see one frame on the screen, if I right click on frame boundary, it will expand everything so that what's going on inside of one frame is now showing on the screen. And everything you see, I'm going to get in the frame again, occurring here, 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 these things are all occurring one after the other. In other words, these can't be done at the same time. This has to finish, then this, then this, then this. All these things have to finish one after the other. Now, everything you see, and again, I'm no expert at this, this is my interpretation, but everything you see going down this way can be done at the same time. So scene per frame is occurring at the same time as 3D scenery, at the same time as DSF terrain, terrain grid and collector draw, terrain, collector sort, because they're flowing this way. Again, this is time going this way, and this is threads, I guess is the easiest way to look at it, going down. So what you'll see here is, again, one frame. And if we put our mouse over where it says frame boundary, you'll see that one frame is taking about 12 milliseconds. And then you can also hover your mouse over each individual task that has to be performed inside of each frame and see how long those tasks take. And everything that's on the same line has to complete one after the other before the next frame can begin. So the next frame cannot start until all these things are done. And if you add up everything on the same line, it should come up to what one frame takes to draw, which, as I said, is about 12 milliseconds. So we've got 8 milliseconds here, and then all these other things should take about 4. That's 1.6, 1.3, 0.4. And if you add all this stuff up, it should come up to 12 milliseconds, which is how long one frame takes to draw. Now, let's go and turn on our other 2 screens and see what happens. Now, I'm going to open up the Micro Profiler again and have to unpause it to kind of refresh the data, for lack of a better term. I'm going to pause it again. And I'm going to right click on frame boundary so that one frame fits exactly onto the screen. Again, I right click on frame boundary because frame boundary is one frame. And you see our frame time now is 32 milliseconds, and it's also showing up here. So the frame time went from 12 to 32. It almost tripled. And another thing you'll notice here is there are 3 scenes per frame, 3 times. Remember, these took about 7 or 8 milliseconds to do, but they have to be done one after the other, scene per frame, scene per frame, scene per frame. So instead of one 7 or 8 millisecond task, we're having to do 3 7 or 8 millisecond tasks each frame. Also, 3D scenery has to be done 3 times. DSF terrain has to be done 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. You're seeing a lot of things have to be done 3 times, one after the other, as opposed to at the same time. And that's why your frame rate goes down as you add additional screens, because you're doing additional tasks that have to be done one after the other. Now, what is the solution? Well, of course, our frame rate went, let's say, down to 31. So what's the solution? Well, it's easy to say what the solution is, and it's hard to actually do it. So the solution is to get scene per frame, for instance, one below the other, going down this way, as opposed to going out this direction. Everything that goes out this direction has to be completed one after the other. And that basically comes down to the structure of the sim and getting things, what do you call that? Multi-threaded. So that, let's say you have a 12-core machine in your system, or 12-core processor in your system, that each of these scene per frames can be done on a separate thread, or in other words, core, and they can be done concurrently. And then as you're adding additional screens of X-Plane, your frame rate doesn't go down much, but your processor utilization goes up. And instead, what we see here is our processor utilization stays roughly about the same, because everything's having to go through one thread. The same thread is maxed out. That one thread just has a lot more work to do, and therefore takes longer to complete, which means each frame takes longer, which means frame rate goes down. Again, our frame time went from about 12 milliseconds down to 32 milliseconds, or 1/3 of a second, which of course sort of equates to about 30 frames per second. So hopefully that helps explain. Now this microprofiler, and again I'm going to unpause it, is much deeper than what I've shown you. It's got all kinds of crazy stuff in here that I don't even understand what it all does. I have just honed in on this one particular thing that I'm taking a look at, and that is additional screens and how that affects frame time and why. There's a lot more that can be done here. I believe you can see the impact probably on plugins and other things, but I may take a deeper dive on that at some point. But feel free to come in here and you can play around. And there's like I said, there's all kinds of things in here you can do. Remember a couple of things. You can do your scroll wheel to zoom in and out. And then remember, you can also right-click on any particular task and make that thing as wide as the screen. So if I right-click on 3D scenery, boom, the screen expands out so that 3D scenery takes up one screen width. And then you can see everything that's occurring at the same time. And then if I right-click on frame boundary, that makes everything, frame boundary is one frame, and that makes everything on the screen with a width exactly of one frame in the simulator.